Oh yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, yeah.
This was here.
The lower the grade, the better.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
That's right. Cartel owns
The,
my
the less safer usually the better tasting.
You get a brick and a burrito all in the same place.
Yeah. Just eat the burrito first.
Yeah.
Well, do part of the brick, you're gonna want to eat more of the burrito.
It depends on what the,
Yeah, I was about
what's
to say,
the, what's the brick.
break that I like to do. This ain't no burrito.
Yeah, I got you,
Maybe a week later.
dude.
starving.
That's where I was. That's exactly where I was.
You're gonna be drawn. You're gonna be drawn with the food in the burrito.
I never
Spelling out shit.
smoked weed my entire life. Seriously.
Really?
Yeah, I never smoked weed.
Not once.
Not one. Didn't take a bite. I did not even do that. I did not take a. I didn't take a hit. I didn't do it. To me, it was like everybody would be. Of course, back then we had Quaaludes, right? So you get the same effect without the hangover. So it was like, yeah. And so you're eating ludes, and it's like, and then drinking all you can. And my attitude was, I would rather put it up my nose. So that just was my thing.
Do it.
So,
Wow.
And it was funny because I actually justified it because I was a drunk. So I'm like, well, I got to get up and work, which I wasn't really sure how that works. I was in school. But at any rate, it was like, you know what I'm saying? So it was like, I'm sitting there and I'm going, yeah, but I got to get up in the morning. So, the coolest thing is I just sit there and take a hit and just, I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
So it's a working man's drug. It's not, right. It's a working man's drug.
Until it's not.
Right.
Yeah. Until it stops working.
So, right. But see, we didn't have meth, man. We had crank. That's a whole nother world.
That was better.
Right.
Yeah, the peanut butter. That bliss style.
The bathtub.
High-speed chicken feed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh.
And you'd sweat that crap out.
Oh.
One time we got Crystal.
That the real Crystal?
Mic check.
Yeah. Hello, mic check. I'm checking the mic, telling a story.
Crystal one too?
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
just listen to the story.
We
You'll know.
floated to the barber shop, and then got to the barber shop, and then the whole time the barber's cutting our hair, we're just like,
Dude, could he
Then
wouldn't
we
be able to. I'd
floated
be going like,
home, then we never, and we never got it again, and it was like, I mean,
that's how we used to tell is really good stuff, man. If the back of your hair was standing up, it was like it was
There's
good.
Old hillbillies tell me if it don't make your hair feel like you're swapping
Right.
holes, it ain't no good.
Exactly.
that's what it felt.
And I'd sit there for like hour, man. Just,
When you know.
We were walking, singing that song, float, float on. Yeah. And it was back to the bathtub from there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
That was all through high school.
When you're ready,
We're
we're live.
live?
Recording.
sure.
Okay. We were just telling other people's stories.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. How about a prayer? You want to pray?
I'll pray.
Pray us up.
Dear Heavenly Father, I want to thank you for this day that you've given us, Father God. Thank you for waking us up this morning, clean and serene, sober from all mind-altering substances. Father God, thank you for your grace, your love, your compassion, your mercy. Thank you for the fellowship. Thank you for Most High Ministries, Most High Media, for creating a safe space for people like us to come and fellowship with each other, Lord. Father God, thank you for the greater purpose that you've created us each and individually for, Father. Thank you for Pastor Paul and Christian. I pray, Father God, that you use them both as vessels right now on this podcast, that you speak to them and through them to us, Father. I pray that thank you for your sending your Son, ultimately, Father God, to sacrifice his life on the cross so that we wouldn't be separated from your presence. And I pray all these things in your Son, Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Most High Show. This is a special edition. We broke the table back out. We're having a one-on-one conversation with Pastor, Chef, man of many talents, Paul.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we have an in-studio audience. Leslie's doing quality control. My man Chad's on the ones and twos. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's give a warm welcome to the Most High Show. Now, I didn't get a bio from you.
Right.
So why don't you just take a second just to kind of, I gave you pastor, chef,
Sure.
coach,
Yeah.
yeah,
Right. All that stuff.
financial advising,
And yeah.
yeah.
Done it all, right? So, so just a quick deal on it. What I do today is I am a culinary director of a company that we have different different things, catering companies, restaurants, stuff like that. And that's what they would call my tent ministry. And but also my heart though is with people in recovery, right? That's always been my heart. And so I got sober September 16th, 1980. So that's probably long before anybody in here was born. So, so I'm kind of the OG of recovery, and I just have a heart and a love for people. And, and so about 15 years ago, I started blending my belief system and also my recovery. And so by doing that, I eventually came up with a ministry that I have that's outside of my church, which is called SPORE, Spiritual Principles of Recovery. So what we do is we literally take the spiritual principles of recovery and the big book and the big book, and we bring them together. And so we begin to look at it differently, no matter what your issue may be. And so the really cool thing is we've opened it up to people with codependency, which my little deal on that is I was the first male to ever go into inpatient codependency, and that's a whole nother story, and we'll talk about it some other time, but it was crazy, right? And it was either that or WITSEC, but at any rate, and it was really literally, so it was kind of crazy, right? And so from that, I started bringing kind of a different view with my sponsees mostly, and then it began to change with other people. And begin to actually, believe it or not, I went through CODA before CODA was CODA, so there was no CODA.
Yeah.
And so I kind of ventured through that, and so in that process, what we have found is that just about everybody's recovering from something. I mean, I don't care. We know that straight up chemical addiction now is 1 in every 2.5 people in the world, right? We know that, or in America, we know that for a fact. But the thing is it's almost 100% somewhere. Right? It's like, has anybody ever y'all seen that new app for codependency?
Mm-mm.
Y'all got your phone with you? Because I'm going to show it to you right now. Take your phone out, right? Okay, right. And you just hold it. You don't have to turn it on. You just hold it, right? Oh. And you put it right here, okay? And you go, and if you fog it up, you're codependent. So anyway, so everybody qualifies, right? And so we start looking at that, and then we start realizing there's so many survivors today. The sex trades out there all over the place. We got, recovering people from that. We got recovering people from sex addiction. We got recovering people from gambling. Man, it goes on and on and on. So basically, what the book tells us so clearly is that it's a spiritual condition, right? Whatever our addiction is, whatever we're trying to remove out of our life, again, the book's very clear. It says that it is but a symptom. That's it, man. Then we get 11 and a half other steps to learn how to live life, period. Something that we weren't able to do because that addiction. Now, here's the crazy thing. Codependency was around in my life long before my addiction was.
Yeah.
Right? I probably was pretty old when I got into codependency, probably 3, maybe 4, right? Because we adapt in where we come from, however we can, and a lot of times adapt and survive become the same thing, and it's usually in a non-healthy environment.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I have to realize is that it's not that every parent is horrible and bad. A lot of parents are busy. Mm-hmm. They're trying to make a living. They're trying to do things. So it's like, oh, I was abandoned as a child. Really? Well, okay. What happened? My parents went to work every day, and I didn't see them. And that's a real reality, right? Yeah. So a lot of times those things within itself begins to affect our life, the way we live. And then we begin to substitute those things with whatever our addiction becomes.
Yeah.
So it's just, it's kind of interesting that I really see so much inner healing by bringing a lot of the spirituality back into the program. I feel like we've kind of lost that. And I just have noticed that in the last 4 or 5 years. It seems that it's almost like a rebellion. It's almost like this attitude of somehow God is here to serve me and I'm not here to serve him. And I keep having to realize that Papa's not my concierge.
Right. Not a genie in a bottle.
No.
Yeah.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
So I know I went way everywhere, but
no, that's good. We've talked about this book Richard Rohr wrote called Breathing Underwater.
Right.
And I think Dean gave you a copy, Joseph. And and we approach it with the same method and modality that 12 steps approaches alcoholism or drug addiction, that you can rid your life of these things, right? These mechanisms,
Right.
And then when we're young, I think, and certainly it's been my process going through the CODA stuff, is I've made all these little contracts with myself, right? Or
Right.
false beliefs,
Right.
or just these it's like hardwired, deep programming that I have no idea is really there, right? Until I get, just like any of us, unless we get miserable enough,
Correct.
that we go, okay, fine, I'll do something about it.
Right.
Right?
Right.
That's the blessing of the first step, right? Is that admission of like, okay, this shit's not working.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, 100%. And it's interesting. We're the only group of people in the world that can burn a bridge while we're building one right next to it.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm still on the bridge, right? It's like, God, all I've done is I've turned around like you're talking about. And it's like, okay, this particular thing's not working anymore. So now let me build another bridge of addiction.
Yeah.
And jump on that while I burn the other one.
Right.
And the whole time I'm convincing myself, well, look how much better I am.
Right.
Instead of saying, let's go back and work on the root cause.
Yeah.
Let's find out what the motivation is, because everything we do we're motivated to do. It's all a motive behind it. And the more that we begin to understand those motives, which, I work with a lot of people with that, and we go back and it's, I'm not one of those that's like, let's go through every dramatic thing and trauma that ever happened to you. It's important. We need to recognize it, but we've got to let it go, right? Or we get trapped there. So when we were able to sit there and go, okay, yes, this happened to me as a child, and it may have been repeatedly, and this happened to me, and it conditioned me to survive a certain way, we have to literally go back and say, I'm willing to get rid of those motives that got me to this point so that I can now start a new process with a new beginning.
Yeah.
And that's the hardest thing in the world to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm thinking of, there's this saying called the loyal soldier. Have you heard of that?
I have.
Yeah, where these soldiers are trapped in an island and the war ends, and the soldiers don't know that the war's ended. And so they're still hunkered up fighting the war.
Right.
And so when they find out that these guys have been trapped on this island, they go and get them. It's been years since the war's ended.
Right.
And they take these loyal soldiers, and when they bring them back to the mainland, they throw a parade. And they honor these soldiers, even though the war's been over for 2 years.
Right.
But they knew they needed to give these soldiers that honoring to say thank you for your service, but we're not at war anymore.
Correct.
Right? And that's the kind of same thing we got to do with these old motives and mechanisms, and say, you got me through high school, you got me through the streets, you got me through slanging drugs, you got me through all that, but thank you.
Right.
But I don't need you no more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that goes from get-go, right? It's like, what's the first thing that we learn? Question everything. What's the angle?
Yeah.
Because either I got to get it from you, or what can I do for you? And I don't care what you do for me.
Yeah.
And I'm not scared to be there, because I know that ultimately I'm not here to be the one who's always receiving. I'm also the one to be serving. And so the more that we begin to get to that concept, and we begin to say, I'm willing to lay down those things. You see, one of the things is that familiarity is the most interesting thing in the world. A baby will sit in his poop diaper until it goes cold. It's familiar, right? And we do the same thing. We'll stay in the same relationship for the longest. You talk about codependency, man. We'll stay in a very familiar place with someone that we probably shouldn't be with. Probably should have never hooked up first place.
Right.
But we're with that person because it's familiar. And then we turn around, and it's like I started dating so many. It was funny. I was always looking, different name, different address, same freaking person at the end, right? Because I was looking for that same familiarity.
Yeah.
So the more that we begin to let those motives die, it's uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable. I remember going through that process, and literally I would keep telling myself, I'm like, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. But I also thought, I don't know if it's daylight or an oncoming train, but I don't care anymore, because I can't keep living where I was living, because I was trapped. I was trapped in some of the things that happened to me as a child. I was stuck there.
Yeah.
And after a while, what I started realizing was, do we still let the abuser abuse us?
Right.
Because after a while, I'm no longer a victim. I'm now starting to become a volunteer.
Yeah.
And so I can't live in that. I have to be willing to lay that down and say, okay, here's the deal. I don't know what's going to happen next, but that don't work.
Yeah.
And things begin to open up.
Yeah. That's hard.
Very hard. Risk is tough.
Yeah. And because it requires letting go, but also a trust
Right.
in whatever God is, that it's going to be okay.
Either God is or he isn't.
Yeah.
Period. You know, and I choose to. Here's what I do know. I would love to say I turned it over. I did step 3 one time, Bubba, and I'm done. One and done, man.
Yeah.
Turned my will over to the care of God as I understood him, you know, which was about that much. But that's all he required, which I love that as he understood him. It's one of my favorite things.
Yeah. Just open the door a little bit.
Little
That's all
bit,
you got to do.
Right. And he doesn't snatch it open. He just shows you.
Yeah.
Right. He just shows you his goodness.
Yeah.
And so part of what I had to let go was this concept that of what I call a Wakamo God. Y'all know what a Wakamo is? The machine that they pop up.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like, you know, it'd be like, hey, God, how about this?
Yeah.
He was the God of no. And so if everything I did in my life I already knew had a moral issue to it, right? I'm not saying that, believe me, I know that what I did had moral, you know, issues that came along with it, but I also believe that what I did was because my biological makeup brings me that way.
Yeah.
Right. And so the more that I begin to understand that, hey, I'm going to put this in a place, and then I got to practice something else too, which is interesting, acceptance. I got to accept that I can no longer live in that garbage. See, I can't keep playing in the garbage pail. I've got to get out. So I've got to accept a new way of life, that there's a better way of life.
Yeah.
Regardless whether I know what it's going to be like or not.
Yeah, and that's hard. It's hard because I think so much about just human behavior in general, knowing is so important.
Right.
I mean, in some ways, what I think we do, and I think what religion does, is we take knowing and certainty and made that our God.
Yes, absolutely.
So rather than being connected to the creator, the force that put it all in motion, we'd rather be subservient to certainty. And what gives us certainty?
Right.
Rules, regulations. Tell me when I'm a good boy. Tell me when I'm a bad boy.
Right.
Tell me when to go. Tell me when to stop. And as long as I'm in these lines, then I'm okay. Right? Because we have to have certainty. And letting go of certainty is really hard. And I feel like over the course of my recovery, I think like at least the more that we've sat together, the more I realize, shit, like I am not that far. Like I'm far along. Like I have, it's like two thoughts at the same time.
Sure.
I'm way better than I thought I was.
Right.
And also, I have so much more to go.
Right.
Like I'm only beginning to scratch the surface of acceptance of myself, who I am, the way that I'm, and what has helped me is sitting with men who have a lot more time than me. And there is this thing, we talked about this a couple weeks ago,
Right.
that there's a thing with men like you, Dean. I have a friend named Kirk Driscoll who got 20 plus years.
Sure.
And there's this level of self-acceptance that at first is almost like, you know, but then there's something attractive about that. There's like, wow, okay, you can be good at things and also acknowledge that, well, you're not good at those things.
Right.
And you can accept that. And that's like a place that I see and I go, man, I want to get there where I'm not constantly beating myself up because I didn't do it
Right.
to some ideal that I created was supposed to be the way I should have done it. You know what I'm saying?
I think you bring up a super valid point. You know, first of all, it's interesting. There's a fine line between confidence and arrogance, right? And the only thing that separates two is humility. And so when you see people in the program with substantial amount of time, who have actually worked the program and have an understanding of truly a spiritual life along with that, that brings in humility. So all of a sudden the arrogance falls out, the humility comes in, confidence comes in, and that's what we want. Because after all, how many years did we go along and we kept feeling like little boys or little girls inside of a grown-up's body, right? I mean, I don't know if anybody else can relate to that, but I remember when I finally broke away from that and I was like, no, I'm a grown adult, being able to adult myself. And, you know, we've said this before, but it's so true. It's like we're the only people in the world that pay bills and think we ought to have a freaking party thrown for us because, ooh, I did what I'm supposed to do, right? And so all that, yeah,
I just did that to Leslie yesterday. I sent her a text of all the bills I paid in May,
right.
and I was like waiting for that. You did it,
Right.
Daddy. You know,
Right,
Yeah.
right. And it's like, great. It's, you know,
Yeah. But I'm supposed to do
right.
that.
It's like,
Yeah.
congratulations, you're an adult.
Right.
And so, you're over 21. Wow. Twice that. So, so you sit there and we get into this. And like you were saying, what happens, and I firmly believe this, I don't believe you can do a competent 6th and 7th step without dealing with codependency first. I think you got to do it. First of all, anybody in here that's ever worked a 6th and 7th step, I never have. It's worked the heck out of me because that's a process step, right? It's a process step. I can't work it. If I could, I'd like blow through it overnight. Go, I'm done, right? Whew, I hope. But it's not. It's a process that we go through. So the more that we begin to follow that process, we come to a place and keep going, why do I keep doing this?
Yeah.
Why do these same character defects keep coming up? Then we sit there and we go, what happened to me before I was using?
Yeah.
Right. And it's interesting because we say that whatever age we started using, that when we come in and get sober, that's approximately the age that we are. There's truth to the maturity aspect of that.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing about that. It's like, okay, why? Why did we stop growing? Was it really the drugs and alcohol? Was it the addictions, other addictions that we may have had? Or were we not in a place to grow anymore? Yeah. And so now that those are removed, the addiction's removed, we can pick back up on actually growing. But we have to go back in and reparent ourselves to have the ability to grow there.
Yeah. So if we were to kind of describe, because I've looked into codependency, it's not a mental health diagnosis.
Correct.
Right?
Right.
But I can see it. I see it in myself. And the more work that I've done, the more, and then other men that I sit with, I go, maybe we want to go through this book with me, because I can see all the same patterns that I had. And I go, I'd love to go through it with you, know? And this is what's happened is people get the book, they'll order the book.
Right.
Amazon brings them the book the next day.
Right.
And then the book sits there.
Right.
And I'm like, dude, I did the same thing. Right.
Right.
So how would we describe or kind of define codependency?
Easy. It's I'll give you two different versions of it, right?
Okay.
I'll give you the first version. If you're in a plane and it's going down and someone else's life flashes before your eyes, you're codependent. But in all reality, it's any time that I'm trying to use relationships, not people, relationships, to medicate. Okay, when I begin to do that, what I'm doing at that point in time is I'm finding myself, I don't like who I am, so I'll manage your life.
Yeah.
See, that is the difference in sponsorship, okay? When someone hasn't been through CODA, they become a little bit of what we call a Nazi sponsor.
Yeah.
Right? This is the way you do it. Well, that's great on 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah.
What about everything else?
Yeah.
Right? Why don't we learn to sit there and say, let me let you live your life, and what I'll do is I'll be here to help direct you if you ask me to, or let you be responsible for your recovery. And when you come to me and ask, I'll work as hard as you do.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to pull you. I'm not going to push you. And I'm not going to sit there and beat you up all the time either.
Yeah.
Right? And so we talk about the it's not a mental diagnosis. It's not. It's a repeated behavior. It's a learned behavior.
Yeah.
There's the difference. If we're not in a proper place to learn, we're going to not learn properly.
Right.
And that's exactly where we begin to find the owner's manual to your child when they were born.
Right.
Self-help books and all that. But no one said, this is the owner's manual for your child.
Yeah.
Never
Your
happened.
Specific one. This is how.
Exactly. So it goes back, because I have a culinary background. I always think about this. There was a lady, it's a true story. There was a lady for years who used to, her grandmother had this beautiful pan, and they would cook every holiday. They would cook a ham. And part of what the grandmother did, she would saw off the very end of the ham. And so the mother did it, and finally the granddaughter, when she got on it, she started doing it. She saw it and said, And her husband says, "Why are you sawing the end off?" She goes, "I don't know. I guess it's flavor. It's something. It must absorb better or something like that." So they finally asked the grandmother, "Why did you do that?" She said, "Because it wouldn't fit unless I did." See, you see what I'm saying? It's like the concept of, well, if I do this, it'll fix something, and sometimes it didn't really need to be fixed.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the behaviors that we learned in our, and listen, it doesn't have to just be, it could be in our adulthood, it can be in anything. If we've experienced rejection, and let's just take we'll say if a young lady has experienced rejection from her dad, and it may have not even been intentional, may have been a divorce, it may have been whatever, right? Work. Man, there's a ton of workaholics out there, right? Especially the last generation of grown men, my generation. It's like that was where you got your self-worth, which is a problem within that self too.
Yeah.
So you may have walked away from your family without meaning to. You may have been present there and still weren't. So all of a sudden this young lady grows up, she goes to college, and this guy sits here and he's like, stalking her practically, and she thinks it's the greatest thing in the world, and he's just the neatest thing that ever happened, and he's good looking, and he's on, it's like, whoo, man, check it out. And, so they end up and they date a couple of times and they hook up, right? Now they're hooked up. Now, it's a whole weekend. Weekend turns into, hey, babe, why don't you move in with me? Right? Because you know how that works in AA. It's coffee on Thursday, get the moving van on Saturday.
Right.
But, because we tend to do that. That's codependent. But as that's going on, what is she doing? She's trying to recapture something she didn't get early on. So from a codependency standpoint, we go back and we say, okay, you keep hooking up with these people who you have a perception of who they are.
Yeah, so it's the internal perspective.
Yeah.
It's so the outer circumstances of what you kind of just described. Don't get bogged down on those things because it's what it is. It's the internal.
Yep.
That in that example, she's turning this shift in her dial to saying, okay, this is who you are, instead of actually meeting the person that you're meeting. We project this persona on that person, and then get mad when they don't act.
100%. Matter of fact, it's interesting because, and it tends to happen more with women than men in this situation, but you know what, basically when a woman sees potential, you know what that actually is? That's a future resentment. Because he's never going to meet your potential you see in him, because he may not actually have that potential, but you see that. So what ends up happening, a shift has to happen. So we go back and we go, okay, your father wasn't there for you. Accept that. Move on. You're not going to find it. Now let's look at what kind of man you really do want.
Well, and the thing that we've been talking about is how do I give myself the thing that I want?
Correct.
Right? Instead of expecting another human or a relationship to give me that thing.
100%.
And I had an instance of this when Leslie's not doing anything wrong. And so I think what I find is codependency seems to hone in on one relationship kind of.
On one-sided?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It kind of like, and then that's where a lot of stuff happens. But as I dive into it, I see, oh man, the way I build contracts, the way I build a client, the way I have client relationships, the way I have relationships with anybody, it's all in all that. So she's just going about her normal routine. But internally, I'm beginning to set something up.
Correct.
In my head.
Right.
Because she's not giving me whatever it is I want, attention or appreciation or affection or whatever it is. Right. I can't even remember what it was.
Based on what you want.
Yeah. Yep.
High technical issues.
Charging batteries up.
Yep. But is it worth anything?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just picked up codependent no more, so y'all like right where I need to be.
When I went through codependency, right, that book had just came out, the original, right? It was Codependency No More. And the other crazy thing is the only other book they had, now here I'm in treatment, they're trying to figure out, I'm the first male, right? I'm the first dude that's gone through this. And they're like, here's this book, read it. And I go, okay. So I read it, and then they go, we got another book. And it was Women Who Love Too Much. Because that was it, right? And so I read about 3 chapters of that one, and I went back in, the therapist said, hey, how did that work for you? I said, it worked great. She said, "Oh, well, did you see some things?" I said, "Yeah, I see exactly why every one of those bitches got treated like they did." Because I'm looking at it from a male perspective, right? And she says, "I am so sorry. I'll never do that again to anyone." But she was like, "I get that,
Yeah.
because that's how I'm wired."
Yeah. All right, we good? All right, so I'm going to pick up with so there's an internal thing happening, and when I saw myself doing, this is what the work has given me, right?
Right.
I begin to see this internal pattern happening. We're talking about the internal world here.
Right.
I begin to see this internal pattern going on, and then I was able to say, oh, I'm trying to get her to meet a need that I need to give myself.
Exactly.
So I need to go get a cup of coffee, sit on the porch, look at the trees, meditate, spend some time with myself, realize that I'm okay,
Right.
just me, right? And I don't need this external. And that's where I think like people think of codependency as it's just like, it's not a big deal,
Oh,
right? But it will. I have several times came to the point of like, I don't want to live anymore. Because
correct.
I don't know how to exist, and I'm doing all the right things, and I'm going to this many meetings, and I got a sponsor, and I'm reading, and I'm doing all this stuff, and I'm doing all the things right, but yet I'm still internally suffering.
Correct.
And so it could bring me, it has brought me to a place where I go, I don't even want to live anymore.
Right. Exactly. One of the things that you have going on in your life is that you're a double winner, right? So you have an addiction background that you've gone into recovery, you recovered from, and so what that ends up doing is now it leaves and exposes all that internal stuff.
Yeah.
That was never dealt with.
Yeah.
And so part of what we go with is and I love this. People are like, "Well, I'm not." God, I go to and I sit there. I'll go to one of the meetings, and I'll hear, "Well, I've never been codependent." Seriously? How codependent do you think you were? You were willing to do anything for your drug of choice.
Yeah.
That's pretty codependent,
Yeah.
right? You've been able to do anything for love, for a relationship, for anything. So what we don't realize is that codependency will kill. And here's the crazy thing. If you really look, and when I talk to people who've been out and they come back in, there's the first reason we go out is real simple. Because we made a choice. That's why we pick up, ultimately, right? But what got us to that choice?
Yeah.
And 9 times out of 10, it's a codependent issue.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like I walked past the liquor store and went, "Oh my God, I'm jonesing," right? Or whatever. It's not, or sitting there going, "Oh my God, there's a computer. I want to watch porn."
Right.
Doesn't sit there. It doesn't work like that. What it works in is I'm not getting what I want or what I think I need. So screw the world.
Yeah, like they say, relapse happens way before that.
Oh, absolutely. Long before you pick up.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And yeah, because we're beginning to, that's why relationships are kind of one of the top things that bring people back out, right? Because we don't know how to navigate it, right? And this is in the 12 and 12 in the 4th step. It says that we don't know how to be a worker among workers.
Correct.
Just a member of the family.
Right.
We either want to be domineering and everyone's underneath us, or we want to be completely subservient to somebody.
Right.
I mean, this is in the 4-step literature of the 12 and 12.
I mean, it'll bring it right back, okay?
Okay.
So we're going to throw a little bit of a theological aspect to it. So, okay, in the beginning, we look at Adam. So there's Adam cruising around. He's enjoying life. He's really enjoying life. He's doing pretty well, right? And so the only contact he really has is with God. And then God says, they all get, Godhead says, "Hey, look, let's get him a helpmate." So, woman. And now they have put God out of the garden. So what that brings me to bringing it back is a lot of times, like you said, there's times I need to go take care of myself, a cup of coffee or whatever. Part of what I also need to do is realize that when I get back into that communion with God,
Right.
it would leave it that we wouldn't have any need for God.
Right.
So it brings us back to the spiritual aspect of our life. A lot of times, even codependency, I'm telling you something, it's one of the most codependent things I've ever seen in my life is religion. I mean, 100%. It's used to control, manipulate, so you don't want to have anything to do with that. Well, unfortunately, somehow we attach God to religion or relationship.
Yeah.
When we do that, our codependent behaviors start coming even greater so because I need to fix you and you need to fix me.
Yeah.
But we're not equipped to fix each other.
Right.
So the more that I start realizing that if I can get rid of the religious abuse and all that other stuff and get it out of my head and start realizing that God never hated me. I watched, man, I went down, to the front, pray over me. They're like, oh, you're never going to do this again. 3 days later, I'm doing the do.
Yeah.
And sitting here telling myself what a piece of garbage I am.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to go over and want you to tell me how great I am. While I'm in my brain, the whole time I'm thinking, if you really knew me, you would hate me.
Right.
So how in the world can we grow from that? We can't. So part of the healing from codependency is beginning to sit there and say, I will humble my opinion even of myself. I will begin to say, you know what? And humble means to do what? To make it less than. I don't have to be on top and I don't have to be arrogant.
We good? No, switch it. It's all good. Yeah. Batteries are finicky.
Understand?
Yeah. So if you charge them, they'll get full of charge, but then if you leave them on the charger,
Then
they
start
die.
to deplete, yeah.
And then if you take them off, so it's like almost need to go buy new batteries every quarter or something, because they just stop holding the charge.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And then I looked into doing, you can plug them in, like they have battery things, but then there's all these horror stories of the cameras getting burned out.
Right, start
'cause
smoking.
it's not enough. Yeah.
It's drunk.
What are you seeing now? Same? Okay. Same thing? Does that? You have to like restart everything, the main fix. No, the battery's full. So quiet, guys. Paul's over here just dropping gems.
I know.
I hear the couples in here going,
Well,
I hear
was
Dylan keep getting hit in the ribs. That's probably why he left.
telling him I just started reading Codependency No More.
Mm-hmm.
So the topic's pretty
Yeah.
ironic. Well, I wouldn't say ironic. A reason, but
No, it's. I mean, it puts it in very simple context of all of a sudden you're like, that's me,
that's me.
That's me.
Everything.
right? Or we start going, oh yeah, that's them,
Yeah.
and if you're doing that, then you definitely have an issue with codependency.
Oh, man.
I definitely go, that's me, that's me. Yep.
I can't tell you how many times I read like a devotion. I go, oh, you know who would be really like this one?
Right.
It's a really interesting point.
Is that a good?
I'm never gonna send one again.
Well, it's really funny, right? So you have narcissist, right, which is an overused term now, but at any rate, and so every ex-boyfriend or girlfriend is a narcissist, you know. But what's funny is when we start identifying how they're narcissist, that makes us a narcissist.
It's crazy to fans and self-worth. Like,
Well, you don't see any self-worth, so you create self-worth.
yeah, you got to seek validation.
Right.
All right, I think we're good. We're back. Recording, streaming. All right, I have no idea where we were.
I don't know. So just go.
Yeah.
Pick it up wherever you want to.
Well, I think this. So this is a book that The Language of Letting Go. It's
Yep.
a daily devotional.
Yep.
And I thought I'd bring this in because I think it covers a lot of stuff that we've talked about.
Right.
And it's kind of like putting this in practice.
Correct.
So it reads, this is for May 31st. It reads, I was talking to a friend one day about something I planned to do. Actually, I was worrying about how one particular person might react to what I intended to do. What if he doesn't handle it very well, I asked. Then my friend replied, you're going to have to handle it well. What ifs can make us crazy. They can put control over our life in someone else's hands. What ifs are a sign that we have reverted to thinking that people have to react in a particular way for us to continue on our course.
Mm-hmm.
What ifs are also a clue that we may be wondering whether we can trust ourselves and our higher power to do what's best for us. It's big. These are shreds of codependent ways of thinking, feeling, and behaving, and they signal fear.
Correct.
The reactions, feelings, likes, or dislikes of others don't have to control our behaviors, feelings, and directions. We don't need to control how others react to our choices. We can trust ourselves and, with help from a higher power, to handle any outcome, even the most uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And, my friend, we can trust ourselves to handle it well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. That's hitting on a lot of the stuff that we've talked about.
Absolutely, absolutely. And when the more you look at the what ifs, it's so interesting to me. When someone's steeped in codependent behavior, when they're steeped in that mindset. I'll give you an example. If I'm doing a program with SPORE, if we're sitting there and one person goes, I just don't get it, right? They may put that, in the text. I don't understand. Feeding fear.
Yeah.
Because in the fear, it goes all the way from there. I had this sponsee, right, and she was always freaked out about losing her job. And I'm like, look, if you lose your job, or her car would break down. If my car breaks down, I'll lose my job, and then I know that I'm gonna end up losing everything, and I'm gonna be under.
Gonna take the house.
Yeah, and I'm gonna be under a bridge.
Catastrophizing.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, that's a big what if. That's more what the. But I mean, it really it's like is a what if that. Well, what if? What if a meteor hit the world tomorrow? What if? And it goes back to why I can't live in tomorrow. But again, when we're not confident within ourselves, and I've got to get validation from somebody else, I got to get it from everybody.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, I sit there and extend maybe finances, maybe whatever, because what if you don't like me?
Mm-hmm.
What if you don't understand what I'm saying? What if you don't want to be around me?
Mm-hmm.
The cool thing is, the better we get at that is like, what if you don't? Right?
Yeah.
I think one of the greatest things in the world is a sponsee says, you're fired. Thank you.
Yeah. Good. It wasn't
Right?
working.
Because
Yeah.
I'm like, guess what? That's one more off my list. I can go help somebody else. And I don't have to get my validation of who I am from them.
Yeah.
So the what if game ends up putting us in a place to let all of our character defects roll back in.
Yeah. But there's some value in being a what if person, right? I think what if people can also be really good at running a business
They can.
or, anticipating. So it's like sometimes I think like these character defects, I was telling somebody that character defects are when they're right sized,
Correct.
they're character assets.
That's correct.
And when we let them get too big, they become a defect.
100%.
So like when I'm looking at my 6 step and I see controlling, and
Mhm.
my old sponsor, Clint, helped me with this. He said, there's a reason why controlling's still there 10 years in.
Right.
And it's because you're getting something out of it.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's right sized, you being controlling is actually you just being responsible.
Mm-hmm. 100%.
But
Exactly.
if I let responsibility take over, now I'm controlling, and now it's a defect, and now I'm going to do everything to manage this controlling behavior.
So let's take it even before then, right? Let's take the character itself. Let's use something like, honesty. Well, there's a fine line between being honest and being abusive.
Yeah.
So
I'm just being honest.
Yeah, just being honest. So all of a sudden that becomes a character defect. So it's a
Yeah.
good characteristic that became defective. Or how about this one? We can all relate this one. Loyalty.
Yeah.
They're loyal to a fault. Right. So being loyal is a good thing. It's when I begin to put your needs in front of mine. Oh gosh, sounds like codependency. When I put your needs in front of mine, then I'm loyal to a fault.
But then at the same time, we're supposed to put others first.
Yeah, but I'm supposed to put others first after I take care of me.
Yeah.
Difference. Or how about this one? I need to take care of my family before I take care of everyone else.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, this was one of the things, like, if we would have sat together this morning instead of sitting together tonight, this was one of the things I wanted to bring up was because, like, the last few weeks I've had family in town. It's been my daughter's graduation. Then I was sick. And then I picked up my buddy from rehab. And then I picked up another friend's medicine, and I got to ship it to him. Then my dad got sick. He had to go to the hospital. So I'm like, all day long, I'm running around for everybody.
Right.
And at some point in the day, I was like,
Right.
fuck all y'all people.
Right.
That's how I really, honestly felt. Like, y'all just need to take care of your own stuff.
But it got to that point.
It got to that point. But the difference was I allowed myself to be okay with the fact that I got to that point. And I realized that I'm a little burned out right now.
Right.
And I can be burned out, and I need to take a minute.
Right.
I need some time. And maybe all the circumstances, I need to just ride this out to the end of the day. But the next opportunity, I need to take a minute. Like half a day, I need to take some time for me because I've been focusing on other people so much to almost to a codependent kind of degree.
There are things that have to be done, but a lot of times we put a time limit that doesn't need to be there. It's kind of like power napping. It's really okay if I take a 30-minute break while I'm doing this for everybody else. Because
you told me that. I called you on the phone, and you said, you can walk away. You could take a walk.
Right.
You can go grab your son and say, oh, me and my son are going to go do something.
Right.
You can remove yourself from the situation at any point.
Correct.
When it gets overwhelmed.
Right.
And what codependency, going through this work, has taught me is that before I would have never even given myself permission to do that because of this should and ought mentality.
Sure.
Which I think I was also steeped in religiously too. In religion, it was all about I should and I ought to do this, so I'm going to do it.
Right.
I don't really want to do it.
Right.
But I'm going to do it, right? And at some degree, yeah, you got to do it, and you got to fake it till you make it, right? But I had taken that to an extreme, right?
Right.
And so the ability to say, I'm walking away, and this whole thing is not going to fall apart when I walk away.
Right.
You know, like everyone's not going to lose their mind, and I'm not responsible for everyone's happiness.
So if you become responsible for everyone's happiness and you become responsible for everyone's needs and you become responsible basically for everything, what position did you just put yourself in?
God.
Yeah. So who do we just move out to do that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the whole point. Sometimes, I love the fact that we can restart the day at any time. Well, there's more than just me restarting the day. What that means is I can go back and start it like I should have started it in the beginning with that, maybe a reading, it may be whatever, maybe meditation. It's definitely prayer for me. And so I'm able to take a couple of minutes with Papa and say, hey, look, I'm overwhelmed. I'm being blown up. I don't know what's going on here. And it's amazing because he doesn't go, well, you're an idiot. He sits there and all of a sudden a thought goes through my head of wow, I really do like the park right around the corner. The park's right around the corner. I think I'll go sit there for about 30 minutes. Yeah. So those answers begin to come. Yeah. And all of a sudden we go, okay, I have options here. Because see, part of the problem is when we see ourselves, we begin to see ourselves in this vision where I have to do all this in a certain time limit. Well, sometimes we do. Now, you talked about a character defect, how the characteristic behind the defect can become positive. I'm not so sure it becomes positive, or does it just become back to where it was supposed to be?
Right.
And so when we begin to take the defect aspect out of it, and that character becomes a strong, I don't think it's a what if anymore. I think it's a because.
Yeah.
Because I'm able to do that,
Yeah.
I'll do this.
Yeah.
You know, there's no question. To me, what if is a question, because is a statement. And so I take those same characteristics and I'm not questioning them anymore. What I'm doing, because after all, what does what if really say? It's second guessing.
Yeah. Well, and what if will keep all your expenses?
Right.
And have you sat down and wrote down all the money
Right.
that's coming in this month?
Right.
I said, no, I haven't. He said, why don't you go do that? And that's what I did. I sat down, I wrote out all the expenses that I could foresee,
Right.
and then I wrote in all the money that was going to come in that month.
Right. Right.
And I'm like, oh, shit, this shit kind of
Right.
balances out.
Right.
So
Oh,
I
it's-
was
yeah.
what if in the whole thing,
Right.
and all this stress and added in. And that's like, I think, a level of,
Isn't the fact that you're sitting there going, I just don't have any money. It's the fear of what happens if I don't have money. How do I pay the mortgage? How do I pay the food? How do I, and then here's the codependent part of that. Well, if I can't do those things, my family's going to look at me a certain way.
yeah.
But in the same flip side, we flip that over, and all of a sudden we turn around because we're able to pull the money together or whatever. We go, they should appreciate me, right? For the same flipping thing.
Right. Yeah.
And so we're the one that keeps taking external issues. It's the most amazing thing. I started doing that years ago in business, and I used to say, I'd much rather be broke knowing money's coming in than to be broke and have no money coming in, right? And so when I sat down and I begin to go, wow, you know, here's a budget, here's what we owe, here's what we got coming in. Oh, that's so cool. God, you did it again.
Right. Yeah.
And it wasn't, and because where I used to go with that, and then the next I go, but what if we don't bring anything in next month?
Yeah.
Because see, certainty is a motivator of mine. Everybody has something. Some people are certainty. Some people are honest. Some people are different. There's always a motivator in mine, certainty.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because you can't really own a business and be certain.
Right.
You don't know what your budget is next month, and you don't know what you're going to bring in next month. We have an idea, but we don't know.
Yeah.
So do I go live in the what if, which is absolutely going to polarize me? I'm going to sit there, and the next thing I do when I get like that, I isolate.
Yeah.
Or how about this one? I'm certain that God's going to provide.
Yeah.
And I have to, that's where I'm at. I have to be comfortable with that. I'm certain that God is going to provide.
Yeah.
And I have literally been in a position before where they were shutting my water off at you know, in the company years ago, 2008. They were shutting the water off. I mean, we had nothing. And I remember this business advisor came in and told me I was basically bankrupt and broke. And I said, no, I have food in the refrigerator. I got food in the walk-in. As long as I got food, we can cook, right? And so the irony to it is, in that moment, I made a decision. I was just going to believe that God could and would if he were sought. And that's exactly what I did. God, you know the position. You know, I didn't scream at him, which makes no sense when people go, I can cuss God out. Well, congratulations. Or, you know, or I beg God. God don't want to hear that either, right? He just says, have a conversation with me. So he did. And I ended up picking up a $6 million contract that lasted us that lasted us 8 years.
Wow.
And so, and it wasn't enough to carry us all, but it was enough I didn't have to worry for 6 years. So we literally went from, didn't know if the electricity was going to be back on to, wow, we don't have to worry about our expenses anymore. But man, I could have easily gotten in that what if, because I used to do it so much of what if we lose it? See, here's the thing. What if we lose it? Then here's where it really came down to. Then my dad was very successful. Then my dad's not going to see me as a success.
That's the real fear.
I failed.
Yeah.
That's the real what if.
Yeah.
Right? That's the codependency.
Well, and there's still a lot I get out of, like, even with that, like the money that came in May. It's not like it was provided.
Right.
But I still want to take ownership and credit for it.
Right.
But it just, things happen, a donation came in or a client, it's like these things kind of happen. And I spent a lot of time bitching about money, and then I realized, man, I'm like providing false testimony because ever since I went independent, 10 years ago, I've never missed a payment.
Right.
We've never not had food. I own all my cars. It's always come in.
Mhm.
It's always happened.
Right.
And it's like that kingdom mindset
Mhm.
of living in this. There's a natural flow and rhythm happening that if I enter into, and I don't think-
Exactly. So it goes, so what I'm saying is it's like,
So what is it that then is like, what's pulling me to that? What's making me try to reclaim that?
because
constantly?
you keep needing for some reason, and we just hadn't gotten there yet. You still have a need for a validation that somewhere you don't feel like you either deserve or
Yeah.
that you haven't gotten, or
Yeah.
maybe a combination thereof.
Yeah.
What I do
I'm
know,
needing to somehow, there's something in me that says if I don't provide value,
right?
then I am not valuable.
Correct. So where's your value coming from?
Right. It's in,
Is it coming from an external issue?
yeah. Right. Not that the thing that I can mentally know, which is like, I know that a human is valuable because they exist.
Correct.
Right. And I can look that, and I can say that to my brother Dylan when he calls me and he's going through it. I can see it clearly. Like,
Mhm.
you ain't, I think I told him this once. You ain't got to do nothing.
Right.
If you did nothing, there's something like, so I'm kind of like creating my own, like pain and misery, my own
Mhm.
suffering,
Right.
because I'm setting myself up to be this thing that's no one's really asked me to be,
Mm-hmm. Right.
right? Because I think if I was to look at my family dynamic, what my family dynamic is, they want to be happy.
Mhm.
That's really what they like.
Sure. And what brings
And so-
happiness in there?
It's the vibe, it's the energy.
There you
It's
go.
when I come in and we talk and we laugh.
Right.
That's what they love.
So
right.
so what kind of vibe do you put out when you show up and it's like, I
I
need to be
spent
appreciated?
$10,000
Right.
this month, guys.
Right. I need to
They're
be
always like,
appreciated here.
"Okay, Dad, thanks,
Y-
bro."
you know what I
what's
love
that
about it?
mean?
Here's the beauty of it. You know what they hear? Wah, 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 wah. Because it's a broken hip, man, that I can pull this stuff together. I immediately, before my brain can go there, I have to say, man, God did it again.
Yeah,
Papa came through one more time.
yeah,
Wow. And so I will tell anybody today, there's nothing that I did ever in the history of my businesses that I did something that I all of a sudden gave us these huge contracts. Every single one. I had a guy one time call me up and he goes, yeah, I lost your number, but I found it on the internet. And I said, really? So you're calling? But I'm sitting there and I'm going, this is interesting. The guy comes in, he says, look, he says, I want to not just hook up for this, we want to bring you in for this thing. I'm like writing it up, and all of a sudden it's like, I'm going to go negotiate this contract.
oh man,
And so I walk in and the guy is basically paying on West Coast wages and I've got East Coast pricing. So I'm a lot less.
wow,
And see, God, and finally, right before I walked in, I was like, God, give me the words. I was like, Papa, you got to talk through me because as much as I think I'm
Yeah.
good at this.
Moment of clarity.
Yeah, it was like, this is big league. And I walked in there and I remember I had it and he says, well, I'm just going to tell you, I'm not going to pay you more than $44 and I went,
You were probably priced at
Yeah.
like 12 or
no,
15.
I was like 39. I'll never get it. It's at 38 or 39. But this is 200 people a day. And I take $4, multiply it by 200 people.
Yeah, it's a big contract.
Big number, right?
Yeah.
So you're talking about an additional $800 that he turned around and paid me. And I said, you know what? Let me do this. I said, I would be embarrassed to show you my pricing. He said, well, you need to sharpen your pencil. I said, I sure do. Right. And I eased out and I came back the next day with $44.28 because he had to feel good about it. My point I'm getting to is God literally did for me what I could not do for myself, but I was trying to do it and it would have cost me.
Yeah.
That particular contract was over $3 million. Okay, over about 6 years. So it changed the whole, literally the dynamics of our company between
Yeah.
the two big contracts.
And this is what you're talking about when you're talking about bringing spirituality
Yes.
back in.
Yes, yes.
And this kind of like letting go and saying to however it happens
Yep.
for you.
Yep.
Right.
And that's where I love, like I said in the beginning, third step, God as we understood him.
Yeah.
And I don't care where that is. But here's the thing, and we'll kind of, bring it together here is bottom line is that the concept I've had of God is definitely not the concept that I have today, because the concept I had of God was a manipulative, controlling God.
Yeah.
When I laid that down and was willing to walk away from that, not run from it because I'm angry, but say, you show me who you are, Papa.
Mm-hmm.
He took on a whole different, all of a sudden it's like, you've been for me this whole time. I just couldn't see it.
Yeah. Man, I'm not sure how long we've been running, but we've had batteries die, and I think we're probably getting close.
Yeah.
So as we're closing, what are kind of your final thoughts? I mean, I like what you say about not being able to really work a 6 and a 7 without getting into these motives and codependency is a good way, or the framework around
Sure.
codependency is a good way to really work those. But as we're closing, like, what are your kind of final thoughts of encouragement for people? I know that I wasn't ready for this until I was ready for this.
Correct.
And you said this when we first started working together, was that right around where I'm at, 10, 12 years, is when you see people kind of go, hey, I got this thing.
Right.
That's not, life's not, something's, what's up?
Right.
And that's when it's time. Do you think that somebody in earlier stages of recovery can begin to address these things?
Oh, absolutely. I think that here's exactly what I think. Good, bad, or indifferent. I believe, and most quote-unquote old-timers will tell you the same thing. We tend to believe that people live a step a year. You can work them all in 3 days. I don't care. But you tend to live a step a year. So you get around 4, 5, 6, programs just don't seem like it's working like it used to. It's kind of the newness is worn off. Well, think about that. 4th, okay, I've got to get honest with myself. We see a lot of people start therapy at that point in time. 5th, okay, I need to begin to deal with this. 6th year, we come up into a place where it's like, ooh, these things are kicking my butt, and I can't get comfortable. I can't shake them. I must be a failure. That right there is that's the cream place. Now you can start working code a year. The problem is you're not going to get clarity on it till you move everything else out.
Yeah, right.
So by working at least the first 5 steps of the program at that point in time, we have now put everything on a shelf. But here's the most frustrating part of sobriety, I think, is here we've done a thorough 4th and 5th. We've really done the 4th. I don't know about anybody. My first 4th step was, I don't know, a novel, and the 5th step was probably half true. I don't know, a lot of made up stuff. But when I did it, finally got deep into it and finally did a complete 4th and 5th step, what began to happen is it left a void because I kept repeating some of the same patterns. Here I sat down with sponsor, he did the 4th step, that's his. He goes in, he says, here's the patterns. And I go, great. I'll never do them again. And I keep doing them.
Yeah.
That's where the codependency work begins to make a difference. So here's the thing. Here's the hope. Here's the joy of it is it's not going to work for you in everything as far as the program goes. The 12 steps do not cover everything. And it tells us that clearly. It tells us we need to go to outside. Sometimes we have outside issues. We need outside help. Codependency's there.
Yeah.
So when I'm willing to begin to do the smallest work in CODA, I will see such major changes in my program that it becomes crazy, right? It becomes like this want to keep getting better. Here's what I see so many times. The average CODA meeting is 3. People show up 3 times. And the first time they sit there and they hear the description of a codependent, they go, oh my God, that's me 100%. Second time they hear a topic and they go, oh my God, they're in tears. I can relate to this. And the third time they're like, I don't want this.
Yeah.
It's a little too, I don't think I'm this. So all of a sudden it's like, that old behavior comes back. It's like, that's not me. I'm not codependent.
The fear.
Right. 100%. And so if you can push through the fear, I'm a big proponent of like, look, dude, try it for 90 days. I'm not saying 90 meetings in 90 days, but at least go 2-3 meetings a week. Try it for 90 days. And if it doesn't work, like we used to say, we will refund all your misery to you 100%. Right? That's where the hope is when I'm at a place I'm willing to hurt.
Yeah.
And I'm willing to get real.
Yeah. Amen. Man, thank you for sitting with us.
Absolutely.
You've dropped a lot of gems, and I'm sure we'll have you back and wrap about some other stuff. But
absolutely.
I appreciate it.
it.
Yeah. Let's give Paul a round of applause, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for the donors and supporters who make this show and this ministry and the training and everything we do, and all the guys out in Montana possible. If you need help, reach out. You're worth the effort. This has been the Most High Show.
going to church
Right.
what God is, man. I get them fucking what ifs bad, and they usually happen right before I gotta go to court for some reason. And it's crazy. But it's like some days I get up just on awakening, and I'm like that first breath, and sometimes like I don't even like pray. It might be subconscious, but it's like
Sure.
I just go out on my day in blind faith and have no expectations of what the day is.
What if you took the what if and flipped it around? What if you said, you wake up in the morning and you go, what if I just turned the whole day?
I just get up and I go with the spirit that's within me
Right.
to go, and I just, any task that's laid out before me, it's almost like a hot knife through butter. It just happens, and it's easy.
You're in
That the flow and the vibe, and like everything just comes together, and then you can sit back and you be like, God, there ain't no way this is me doing this.
Right.
Like that's crazy. So then like that's where I get that feeling of that spirit, the real spiritual sense, that grit that you get from what God does in your life. Rather than but that's just me. Sometimes
Well, I get it. I mean, and you're moving and you're doing, and I think that's kind of where I'm feeling like I can sit and do those things, but in the action and in the connection and in the doing is when I start to experience that whatever God thing is. I start to get it. I'm going, oh, because I'm doing. Like we were listening to. I was in a meeting in Tennessee, and I think it was a Joe and Charlie tape.
Right.
And the guy was like, I sit down, I meditate, and then I got to get going. I'm alcoholic. I can't just be sitting here for all day long trying to meditate. I got to do something.
Yeah.
It was so refreshing to hear him say that, because it was like, oh, thank God, because it becomes meditative when I begin to do. That's just me. I'm not trying to say, but it sounds like that's what you're experiencing.
Oh yeah.
When you just let go and start going, then you hit that rhythm.
Yeah. And a lot of times, like say, I mentioned the court date things, I'm wigged all the way out before I get there, and I take that final breath, and I do like what you said. I'm like, man, I can't walk in there alone. I just need you to just sit beside me. You know what I mean? And I'm talking to God as I'm doing it, and the shit ends up turning out in my favor. It goes way better than I could have planned for it to happen. I'd be as well prepared as I can be, but I don't go in there thinking, you know what I mean, I got this, because it never works out the way.
Yeah.
Well, you got you there. So you're the last person who needs to try to get you out of it.
No, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. You were talking about how, like, huh?
Up there on the seat in the
Me?
microphone.
Why?
I'm gonna be capturing this.
Oh Lord, please don't. Okay. Am I supposed to move that?
Yeah, just pull it right in front of you.
Oh Lord, I was not planning this. Okay. Woo! All right. Now I'm nervous. I'm just kidding. Kind of. Okay, so what you were talking about is, for me, I have almost 7.5 years sober at this point in time. And I got to that point where I felt like I was doing everything. I felt like I was doing the meetings, I was sponsoring, I had a sponsor, I was praying every day and doing all the things, but I wasn't getting anything out of it. I wasn't getting that release and that freedom that I felt in the beginning. And I got to the point where I was just like, what the hell is the point of all this? Like, if I'm doing everything I'm supposed to be doing and not getting anything, then what is the point? And I balked at God.
Right.
And so when you said that, that was an aha moment I had 2 nights ago at a women's meeting, talking to a woman after the meeting for like an hour. And so when you said that, I was like, kind of like what you're talking about, like the breath, like I could feel it. Like, you didn't have the conversation with the woman, I did. Neither one of you know each other.
Right.
So it was just a God moment to be like, okay, like, kind of like what you're saying, like, I'm not alone.
Mhm.
Like, okay, someone else has felt that and understands that, and that's part of the program too,
Yeah,
is that we're not
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, isn't it nice to know that literally we're not the only one? I'm not the only one. You're not the only one.
No.
Okay, because let me tell you where I was at 7 years. I was in a rehab. 7 years sober. Picked up my 7-year chip in rehab, A&D rehab,
alone.
right? And there's a long story that I won't go into it, but the point is that what it came down to is one thing: surrender. I'd never surrendered.
Mm.
And so when I surrendered, things began to change spiritually, which meant that I began to not only change, but I felt different. I could feel the presence.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like the book talks about, that we can feel the sunlight,
Mm-hmm.
feel
the
the,
Holy Spirit.
right?
Mhm.
And it's like, I get that, you know?
Mhm.
And so,
Well, yeah, what used to be an occasional.
right, yeah. Hey, I hope I get it,
something
right?
we rely on.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think some of that is a trust level with God too. I know that sounds weird, but it's like I don't know about anybody else, but you know, when I got high, it wasn't because I wanted to feel down. I was trying to get out of me. And I've seen a lot of people use religion the same way. They'll go to these churches and be like, "Oh, I feel good." They're looking for goosebumps, right? And I think we have to be in a place where God says, "No, I want relationship. I want that relationship." So
Yeah.
you feel me,
Mm-hmm.
and it changes everything.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Who else? Anyone else want to get in there?
Yeah, Dylan, you had a lot to say. Yeah, I was gonna say you had a lot to say a few minutes ago.
I hear it.
Man, it's always cool to see people. You know, it's like I ain't even seen Paul in like it's probably been over a year, but just running into each other and stuff. No, man, yeah. Sometimes I get in my head thinking like I was talking about the what ifs, and it's not always just like court dates. It could just be, you know, hell, it could be like finances, but like it's anything. If I'm sitting there questioning what if I'm second guessing my future, I've already decided the outcome.
Mm.
You know, and I keep this little saying with me: if I focus on all the things that I don't have, I'm gonna miss out on the things that are right in front of me.
Right.
You know, if I would have sat at the house today and been like, "Oh, I worked all day, I'm tired. You know, I don't want to go through 285 traffic. My car's got fucking wore out." I didn't even say nothing. I just went. I just knew that it was something we should go do, and did it. Could have made 100 excuses why, and I come up with excuses all the time. So.
Isn't it amazing that when we lay something down and we say, "Okay, I'm gonna, no matter what, I'm gonna go do this. I feel led to do it. I'm gonna go do it." Then it happens. It works out. Then we have that moment of, wow, it may have been a God thing. Because here's my big question on that: worn out tires, worked hard, all that kind of stuff. Did that ever keep you away from the dope, man?
No. Hell no. Right. Somebody else was worn out tired. I tell you, this one time. Yeah, check it out. So I didn't even have a car, but I'm like, man, we need to go to Waffle House and we gotta get some drugs and stuff like that. And I knew this chick's tires were like showing, like, you know, wires and stuff. I'm like, I'll drive. We'll be safer. And like, I had all this money for the drugs and stuff. Well, we ended up blowing the tire on the way to Waffle House. So I spent the whole day hustling up to get a used tire to finally accomplish the mission, you know. Mm-hmm. And that's like, and I didn't even think about it. Mm-hmm. But in that, at the same part, like that whole, I helped you, you know what I mean? Like, mm-hmm. I'm the good Samaritan of the day. Like, I saved you, but here's some heroin.
Right. And I'm sure, and I'm sure the dope boy appreciated why he was using your car. But anyway.
Yeah. Christian told me one time, he's like, man, all your stories are, he's like, here's your common theme. He's like, it always deals with a hot rod or a fast car, some chick, and a bag of dope. And I'm like, damn. I gotta quit doing shit like that.
So in that case, no one's asked you to do much, right? They just asked you to not do any of that anymore.
Yeah.
So just change your whole life. No big deal.
Drive my own car, no dope, and, you know, just one chick.
Yeah.
I'm doing anything crazy.
Yeah, I don't even understand the whole sister-wife concept because I guarantee you it wouldn't be like,
Whoa.
"Ooh, I got all these different women." It'd
He
be
went
like
there.
they all ganged up on me. That's, you know, right? Because right, I'm that guy. I'm that tool. So they would be.
Chad had a belly laugh. That shit. That's intense. Yeah.
Who else? Anybody else? Got anything?
Come on, somebody.
I feel like you got something. Come on.
Oh, appreciate you coming out today.
Well, I
man.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was really interesting what you were saying about, how we're kind of the only people that seem to be burning one bridge as we're currently building another bridge. And to me, I mean, I stay steady building a lot of bridges, and I've got an addictive personality.
Right.
Like whatever it is that I'm doing, I seem to like. I don't know if it's like ADD or just OCD or just an addiction piece, but I mean, anything I do, I tend to do it full force, and I become like addicted to that thing. I've got so many hobbies, I just don't have enough time.
Right.
That's my most limited resource is time, and it can really be stressful or strainful at times because so many things that I want to do. But I mean, I see a lot of things through that lens, and so I see so many of those things as addictions. And like, you'd spoken on, I mean, recovery for me is an addiction. That's a substitute for a substance. And so people jump out of, active addiction with drugs and alcohol, and they jump into AA meetings and things like that. Well, they're substituting one for another. That's a great step forward. You've done a lot of harm reduction there. I'm all for it. Hold on to that addiction kind of thing. But people do the same thing with religion, and I mean, whether it's sex, gambling. I mean, we can go through all the process addictions and stuff too.
Right.
But,
Right.
That was a really interesting take on that, and I just
Well,
enjoyed that.
one of the really cool things in your life is that it all still comes from one thing, right? Comes from addictive personality. So we can either do one of two things. I can say, well, I'm a victim to my addictive personality, and so everything I get hold of, that's one of those things where it just controls me. Or I can sit there and say, you know what? I can go farther back. I can go back to those motives that caused me to have that addictive personality. And begin to understand what I need to remove those things. So all of a sudden, a hobby becomes a hobby, not an addiction. At the end of the day, what is an addiction? It's anything that controls me.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like going to AA meetings. You're right. Why in the world do you think we tell people that you need to go to 90 meetings in 90 days? Hello. Habit, right? Just getting you in a habitual situation. And if you don't believe that we're habitual people will fight over a freaking chair in a clubhouse. That's my chair. Churches are just as bad. It's like, and it's just as bad for me. They'll change sides, and I'm like going, I'm thrown off today because you're supposed to be over here, right?
Yeah.
So it's so funny for people that are so open-minded and all this stuff. We're actually not, and so we need to be able to get into some constant positive places, and so we begin to use that character defect and reverse it back into a positive defect or positive characteristic of saying, you know what, I'm going to get rid of it controlling me, and I'm going to be able to make choices of what I want to do instead of it telling me what to do.
I thought that was another really cool topic that y'all touched on and stuff, was kind of seeing or turning those character defects, and if you keep them in the right size and within the right lens and scope and utilize them correctly, they can become character assets.
Right.
And I think that was really cool too, because you're talking about Kristen, you're talking about controlling and stuff, and you're absolutely right. I mean, if you got if you know the direction that you want something to go, you got a good vision on something like that, you abide by a certain set of rules and things like that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with exercising a little bit of control, especially being at the helm of an organization or
Sure.
even just your own life.
Right.
But, you're right. You're being responsible. So, these things that when we're out running and gunning and, you maybe being, I don't want to say narcissistic, but controlling and things of that nature, they can be a bad thing. But when applied correctly and kept to a certain size,
Well, one of the things that I do, and I don't know why I started doing it, I just do it. My attitude is, how in the world can you even look at a 6-step if you really don't know what your character defects are? And a lot of people say, well, our character defects are what we find in the 5th step when we look at the patterns. No, they're not. It's the character defects that are a result of those patterns, right? So I usually have my sponsees write a list of what their character defects are, okay? And one of the things we do is we look at the good characteristic. In other words, where did that get defective? I don't care. We don't have to go back and research it. I just want to say what causes that. And of course, 90% of it is fear, right? But when we list our character defects, and we turn around and we say, this can be used in a positive way. This is how it's positive for me, the character, and I take the defect out of it, then it does change. Now I have something, and when I say the 6th step and 7th step works for me, what I'm saying by that is it's like, okay, so the first time I go and I do something that's a character defect, I go, damn, did it again, right? The next time I do it, I'm starting to get 3/4 of the way through it, and it's like, crap, I can't believe it. Did it again. And then about 2 more times, and I start going, I don't want to do that. I'm not putting myself in those positions.
Yeah, but you got to go through that, and you have to allow yourself to go through that.
Yes.
And a lot of my recovery was judging myself so much. I never allowed myself to be a fucking human.
Right.
Going through a process.
Right.
So I was fabricating. I was like creating like a false ego. I was creating this persona that didn't do these things. You know what I'm saying? Like
100%.
Yeah.
Absolutely, because
I didn't allow myself to just make the mistake, or and then like now I know it's like this comes out of that book, Drop the Rock.
Right.
And I listened to Drop the Rock. I listened to audiobooks.
Right.
And the lady's discussing about how she has her list of character defects in a bowl.
Right.
And she goes in and reaches and pulls out a character defect, and that's the character defect she's working on that day, right?
Right.
Well, I'm listening to it, and I'm like, yeah, that's a great idea.
Right.
And then the guy goes, that is not the 7th step.
Right. Correct.
The 7th step is you ask God to remove
To remove those. Right.
And the prayer is what's really informative. The prayer says, relieve me the character defect that gets in the way of my usefulness
Correct.
to others. To you
Correct.
and others. So I'm not even in charge of what character defect I get relieved of.
Right. But what's interesting is who's the state that I'm at work for first? That I may be of service to others for you. So if we look at that and like Drop the Rock, my attitude is if you don't have a sponsee, read that, have them read it, because it's, first of all, it's that big. It's not very, But I'm like, if you get through half of it, you basically read the book, right? Yeah. Okay. So it's just saying the same thing I've been saying. It's like it talks about that the character defect works you until you let it process out. So eventually you even get to the point where that no longer is even a temptation. Not because it's not a temptation, it's because you don't care to be there anymore. Like I love music, just love music. And I lived in New Orleans for a while, in Mobile and places like that, right? So blues. Yeah. I love blues. Well, that's great. I work all day, and then next thing you know, I'm hitting the blues clubs at night, right? Nothing wrong with that. I'm not drinking. It's not like that. And the problem is that nothing really good happens in my life after about 1 o'clock in the morning, right? And so all of a sudden I found that I was in relationships that I wasn't planning on, or whatever it may have been, right? So eventually, guess what happened? I decided that instead of dragging my butt into work, I think I'll go to bed. And eventually I didn't care to go to the clubs anymore. I just decided it was more important to sleep. Does that make sense? Yeah. So the more that we let that process all the way through, we won't just have to fight it. We just won't put ourselves in a position of it. Yeah.
It's all taking the ego out.
100%. 100%. And putting God back in, right? Right. You can't, there's not a character defect out there that I can correct on my own. God can.
And you can also have the same time, like, I'm going to keep this defect.
Oh, yeah.
And, Jesus.
Isn't there some defects that are fun?
Some defects are fun.
Being judgmental, like from afar, like, you seeing somebody and you're like, that dude's fucking, he's fucked up, But
right.
But
What are you really saying in that situation? You sit there and say, you go, what's the next thing you say? Hell, I'm not as bad as that.
You're projecting at them.
But what are you really saying to yourself?
judging yourself. You know, you see your problem out of somebody else, but were you talking about looking at it through a different lens, being judgmental? The positive, the character asset would be discernment.
Correct. That would be exactly. That would be the godly belief behind it.
I was gonna say, yeah, because that's gotta be for me. It's gotta be God though, because I can discern whatever I want, and sometimes I have trouble discerning what is my will and what is God's will because I'm easily able to twist that.
Discern, yeah, like say, like it says, judge not
Lest you be judged.
But I think we still have a responsibility to be critical of judgment towards our fellows in the program, like in a way.
Sure. Or are we holding someone accountable, and can we do that without judgment? I think we can, and it all comes down to one thing. A lot of my sponsees appreciate the fact that I'm blunt to some degree, but I'm always in love.
See, that's what
Right.
that was me. I would come, in the beginning, I would come from not the loving place, and the past, I guess, like 3 years ago, I moved in with one of my girlfriends in the program, and she continuously relapsed while we were living together, and I had to learn how to do that.
Right.
At 3, 4, 5 years into recovery, I had to learn how to do those things. How, like you were talking about earlier, like the difference between coming from love and being an asshole. You know,
Right.
like I had to learn how to do that. Like
Right.
I didn't know.
Right. So instead of going, God, you did this again, it comes to, wow, I really hate seeing you keep doing this to yourself.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden that opens up conversation, and it removes shame.
But it's also setting boundaries and establishing this is an okay.
Wrap it up.
Yeah.
Wrap it up.
Yeah, I mean, one of the, judgments and stuff, I mean, they all have obviously negative consequences. I mean, one thing I've learned that judgments invite insecurities into your life. What was it? Do not judge, thou
Right.
shalt be judged kind of thing. So
Right.
it invites insecurities into your life. But yeah, by coming from a place of that loving kindness and being able to do that without judgment is a kind
It's
of
funny.
a beautiful thing.
I think I learned that. I sponsor a lot of women, and I think I learned that more from with guys. It's easy to just sit there and say, "Dude, what you need to do is this," and what do we do as guys? Go, okay. I mean, we do. We're great. Women are like, why? Or, oh my God, you upset me, or you hurt my feelings, or whatever.